Welcome back to her Fireside Stories, where warmth meets wisdom and unforgettable tales come alive. Today's story will grip your heart from the very first line, because when Eleanor's grown children abandoned her at their family cabin, she didn't just accept their cruelty quietly. She transformed it into the greatest comeback of her life, proving that the best revenge isn't anger, but thriving against all odds. But what exactly did she do that left her children stunned, deeply regretting their harsh words? Stay with me until the end to find out. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to our channel to support us and never miss a new story. Don't forget to comment below your thoughts as you listen. Share your opinions, tell me where you're listening from, and let's gather around this virtual fireside together. Now, settle in and enjoy today's captivating story. On family vacation, my kids said, "You slow us down," then left me behind. They deeply regretted what happened next. I should have known something was wrong the moment my daughter Ava slammed the car door, spun on her fancy heels, and told me, "We're done waiting, Mom. You slow us down." It came out of nowhere, a verbal slap so disorienting that I had to steady myself against the trunk to keep from falling over. There I was, standing in the crisp mountain air at our longtime family vacation spot, eyes fixed on the stunned expression of my son Dominic, who couldn't quite meet my gaze. My brain struggled to catch up with their words. Did I hear her correctly? Was my own child really telling me I was a burden? Our old cabin was nestled in the forested outskirts of Pinewood Valley, a place my late husband Tristan and I once dreamed of retiring. We used to imagine the kids would bring their families here, building memories on the same lakefront we'd loved for decades. In the early morning hours, the fog settled on the water in a perfect hush, like the world was pausing just for us. This year, though, the invitation to gather felt more tense, more hurried, more like an obligation they had tried to squeeze between their real commitments in the city. On the ride up, I chalked their attitude up to busy schedules. Ava was a high-powered corporate attorney, always on the phone with clients in different time zones. Dominic was a rising tech entrepreneur who never seemed to detach from his laptop. I tried to tell myself they'd calm down once we reached the cabin. We'd share dinner, watch the sunset, maybe talk about old times with Tristan, gone for 3 years now, but never far from my thoughts. I should have recognized the hollow way they said, "This will be good for you, Mom," as if I needed charity. But everything changed the instant we pulled into the gravel driveway. Instead of warm hugs or relieved smiles, I got a perfunctory nod from Dominic and a laundry list of demands from Ava. "Mom, did you remember the groceries I asked for? The Wi-Fi password is in the folder. Oh, and we'll have to keep dinner quick. I've got emails to send." It felt like they hadn't called me out here to reconnect. They just wanted a change of scenery for their work. And that was before Ava delivered her scathing decree. "You slow us down." Quick break. If you're reading this, let me know how you feel about the tension so far. Comment 1 if you're intrigued. Comment 2 if you'd like to see more background. Or just tell me where you're reading from. Now, back to the story. What followed was a weekend of clipped remarks, impatient sighs, and subtle digs about everything from my cooking to my driving speed. I could practically taste the tension in the air, as thick and suffocating as the smell of burning pine in the cabin's fireplace. Back when Tristan was alive, we had treasured these trips. We'd start each morning huddled over coffee cups on the deck, watching birds skim the lake. Ava used to wrap herself in a blanket and lean on my shoulder, telling me about her dreams of becoming a litigator who'd fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Dominic, always the tinkerer, would be fiddling with some new gadget, asking me to guess how it worked. But that weekend, Ava was no longer the dreamy girl perched beside me on the deck. She was a woman on a mission, strutting around in business suits and barking into her phone like the entire forest was one big conference room. Dominic was buried in code or algorithms on his laptop, punching keys like they were an extension of his brain. No one wanted to do anything as a family. Neither had time to take a walk down to the lake or roast marshmallows by the fire. Worse, they seemed visibly annoyed when I tried to bring up old memories of simpler times. I tried to stay calm. I told myself that this was normal, that kids grow up, get busy, and sometimes forget where they came from. But on the final morning of our so-called vacation, I woke up to find both Ava and Dominic gone without a word. My stomach clenched when I saw their empty rooms and the absence of their suitcases. The note on the kitchen counter was brief. "We can't wait on you any longer. You slow us down. Lock up when you leave." Those words were like a punch in the gut, a stark, handwritten declaration that I was no longer relevant. I held the note in my trembling hands, feeling heartbreak and fury swell inside me like a rising tide. It was in that moment, standing alone in that silent cabin kitchen, that I made a choice. I would not accept this role of burden or inconvenience. I had spent too many years, first with Tristan, then as a widow, building a life for my children. Now they had left me behind, and in a twist even I couldn't see coming, that act of cruel abandonment would become the seed of my transformation. Before I dive into what happened next, I want to share a section from the original text that I've kept relatively intact, just so you can see how this turning point was captured in my first draft. I've changed the character names, but the essence is the same. Here's that excerpt, 0136. When I pulled up to the old cabin that Friday afternoon, I felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps this was their way of reconnecting, of acknowledging that they'd been distant since their father's funeral 3 years ago. The place looked better than I remembered. Someone had hired landscapers to tame the once wild garden, and fresh paint brightened the exterior. Ava greeted me with an air kiss beside my cheek. "Mom, finally. We thought you'd never make it." "Did you bring the groceries I texted about?" "No hello, no how was your drive?" Just a demand disguised as a question. "I did," I replied, trying to mask my disappointment. "Let me get them from the car." "Great. Dominic's on a call. He'll be busy most of the afternoon. I've got a brief to finish before dinner. The Wi-Fi password is on the fridge. The kitchen's stocked with coffee." And just like that, she disappeared back into the house, heels clicking against the hardwood floors that my husband Tristan and I had sanded and finished with our own hands 30 years ago. I stood in the driveway, the autumn sun warming my back, wondering what I was doing there. It's almost painful to reread that now, knowing what would unfold just a day later. When I wrote these lines the first time, I was still reeling, still unsure if I'd overreacted to that chilly greeting. But time and distance have clarified things for me. That casual dismissal I experienced was just a hint of the storm that was about to break. Ava's prim greeting and Dominic's silent presence foreshadowed a truth that still stings. They'd come here only for themselves, not for me. Pause for engagement. If you've been in a situation where someone's words or actions cut unexpectedly deep, how did you react? Comment 1 if you confronted them right away. Comment 2 if you withdrew and reflected first. Keep those comments coming. After the kids left me at the cabin, I found myself nursing a rage I didn't know was possible. In all my years, I'd never believed I was capable of such towering anger toward my own children. Once I'd gathered my wits, I spent half the morning tidying up the cabin, an old habit of mine, cleaning as a way to process emotions. But the tidy rooms only made the house feel eerily vacant. The question circled my mind. What do I do now? Drive back to the city with my head hung low or stay? A memory of Tristan kept nudging me. He used to say, "If you ever feel cornered, remember this land is ours. This place is our dream, even if it's rough around the edges." It wasn't exactly farmland like we'd once envisioned purchasing in another state. But the old cabin had a modest plot of clearing to one side, big enough for a garden, and a small boathouse for canoes and fishing gear we hardly used anymore. It hit me then how Tristan and I had always planned to retire somewhere like this and live off our little corner of nature. Standing on the porch that morning, battered by heartbreak and disbelief, I made a life-altering decision. I would not go back. Not to the city, not to the stifling role of the parent who only exists to be useful when called upon. Instead, I would stay here. I'd breathe new life into this property. I'd figure out if the soil could be tilled for a garden, or if I could renovate the boathouse into something more. The very next day, I made a few calls to a contractor, to a local real estate friend, and to a landscaping company that specialized in small agricultural projects. If my children believed I was too slow to keep up, I'd show them what slow could accomplish when fueled by passion and grit. I placed the note Ava and Dominic had left on the top shelf of the bedroom closet. I didn't tear it up or burn it, not yet. Let it remain a memento of their words, a reminder that I was done being in the shadows of their ambition. Sometimes it takes being cast aside to realize exactly how strong you can become. During the first week alone, I was bombarded with phone calls and texts, most from relatives who heard I was missing, courtesy of Ava, who had apparently spun a frantic story about me abandoning the city without a warning. My sister Linda was one of the first to get the unvarnished truth. When I told her that Ava and Dominic had left me behind in the woods, Linda didn't sound surprised. They've always been so driven. It's like they don't see anyone else's needs, she said, voice tinged with more pity than judgment. She wanted me to come stay with her. I refused. My second call was to a local contractor named Hank, a middle-aged man with a broad build and a quiet demeanor. Hank specialized in turning ramshackle cabins into eco-friendly homesteads. He arrived in a battered pickup, wearing overalls stained with sawdust and paint. I was honest about my ambitions. I want to see if I can expand the cabin into a proper house with enough land for a small garden, maybe more. Hank nodded, scratched at his beard, and said, "We'll need to do a lot of clearing, but the soil around here can grow a decent variety if we do it right. What's your budget?" When I mentioned my budget, funded in part by what was left of Tristan's life insurance, he whistled but didn't discourage me. "We'll have to go step by step. Start with the basics, fixing any structural issues in the cabin, updating the water system, and making sure you've got safe heating for the winter. After that, we can think about expansions." Step by step, I found that phrase comforting. It reminded me that my own slowness, the very thing my kids mocked, could be an asset here. I was determined not to let the bitterness poison me. Yes, I was angry at my children, but I'd also allowed myself to drift into their background. Maybe this place and this project would be my path out of that complacency. If you've ever started a project as a means to rebuild your life, you know how invigorating and terrifying it can be. Ava called one evening while Hank and I were inspecting the boathouse, deciding whether it was salvageable or should be torn down. At first, I considered letting it ring through to voicemail. I was still hurt, and if I'm honest, a small part of me wanted her to wait, just like she'd forced me to wait at the cabin. But curiosity got the better of me. I took out my phone and pressed it to my ear. "Mom, where are you?" Ava's voice was sharp, businesslike, the same tone she probably used in the courtroom. "I've been calling for days. Are you okay?" Her question almost made me laugh. Was I okay? No, but not for the reasons she assumed. "I'm fine, Ava," I answered coolly. "Just been busy settling in." "Settling in?" She repeated the words like I'd just declared I was moving to Mars. "Mom, you can't possibly be thinking of staying there alone." "And why not?" I asked, looking around at the thick pines swaying in the breeze. There was no other place in the world I wanted to be at that moment. She hesitated. "Because it's isolated. because you've never lived completely off the grid, because you're not. She paused again. You're not a young woman anymore, Mom. What if something happens? I took a deep breath, forcing down the anger rising inside me. The only thing that has happened, Ava, is that you and Dominic made it clear you had no time for me. Now you're upset that I'm actually doing something on my own terms. I appreciate your concern, but I don't need your permission. Her silence spoke louder than any words. In that quiet, I could almost hear her processing the fact that I was no longer deferring to her or to Dominic. This was a first moment of interaction. If you've ever had to stand up for your own needs, especially when others claimed they were acting in your best interest, comment 1 to show solidarity or comment 2 if you're still figuring it out. Your stories matter, and I'd love to hear them in the comments. Winter came swiftly in Pinewood Valley, painting the evergreens with a delicate frosting of snow. Before the first heavy snowfall, Hank and his crew worked tirelessly to reinforce the cabin's roof, insulate the walls, and install a more modern wood-burning stove. I sold off some unnecessary furniture to make room for new materials. The living area slowly transformed from a dusty relic into a warm, welcoming space, a place where I could envision hosting friends or fellow homesteaders for a cozy meal. I spent my evenings reading up on permaculture, sustainable living, and small-scale farming. I learned which plants thrived in cooler climates and which herbs would be best grown on a windowsill. My library of homesteading books expanded faster than I could flip the pages. I discovered local organizations that offered workshops on cheesemaking and organic gardening. Every new skill felt like a personal victory, a step away from the docile mother who had always been overshadowed by her children's achievements. Meanwhile, texts from Ava and Dominic trickled in. Ava demanded updates about what I was doing and insisted I come home for the holidays. Dominic, more subdued, merely asked if he could help in any way. I responded politely but firmly. If they wanted to be part of my life now, it would be on my terms. I wouldn't subject myself to the same dynamic that led me to be left behind in the first place. Just when I thought my new routine had found its groove, a large SUV rumbled into the driveway one cold morning in December. I peered out the window, heart thumping, expecting to see Dominic's bold stance or Ava's impatient tapping foot. Instead, a woman with a sleek haircut and a stylish wool coat stepped out. She introduced herself as Ingrid from the local county clerk's office. "Good morning," she said, offering a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm here to follow up on a zoning inquiry. Something about potential commercial plans for this property." My mind immediately jumped to Ava, who had threatened something similar. It seemed that if she couldn't scold me into coming back, she'd try to rope me in with legalities. But I was not going to be scared off. Not by my daughter, not by the county, and not by anyone else. I invited Ingrid inside, offering her tea by the crackling wood stove. She shook off the snow from her coat and explained that a tip had come in, suggesting I was planning to convert a residential property into some kind of agricultural or retail venture without proper permits. She paused, looking around at the partially renovated interior, the wide new shelving units where I stored my canning supplies, and the small stack of local produce catalogs on the coffee table. "So, is it true you plan to start selling goods here?" Ingrid asked, fiddling with the clasp on her briefcase. I sighed, knowing full well who had likely tipped them off. "I'm exploring options," I replied neutrally. "For now, I'm renovating so I can live here comfortably. If I decide to sell produce or artisanal items, I'll follow the proper channels." Ingrid gave a tight nod, then launched into a list of regulations: construction permits, zoning codes, possible need for a business license. She seemed genuinely willing to help me navigate the process, rather than shut me down. By the time she left, we'd reached a tentative agreement. She'd send me some forms, and I'd keep her posted on any plans that might shift the property from purely residential to a homestead or small scale business. As her SUV disappeared down the snowy driveway, I felt a sense of relief. Perhaps Ingrid hadn't come to ruin my dream after all. But it did confirm one suspicion. Ava was not letting this go. Whether she feared for my well-being or was simply outraged that I was asserting my independence, she had escalated her meddling to the legal realm. Engagement break. Have you ever had family or friends use bureaucratic or legal measures to nudge you into doing what they want? Comment 1 if yes, comment 2 if no, but you know someone who has. It's more common than people think. Now, let's get back into the thick of it. By January, the cabin had transformed into something closer to a snug mountain retreat, complete with a newly installed solar panel on the south-facing side of the roof. Hank and his team discovered that the boathouse could be revitalized with some carpentry and new windows, turning it into a workspace for crafts or even a small storefront come springtime. I felt a twinge of excitement every time I imagined jarred preserves or homemade candles lined up neatly by the lakeside, waiting for curious passers-by. One weekend, just as the heavy snows began to melt, Dominic finally showed up, alone, without warning. I heard the crunch of boots in the driveway and looked out to see him stepping gingerly through the slush, an uncertain expression on his face. His tall frame was bundled in a sleek winter jacket, and he carried a laptop case under one arm, as though he couldn't bear to leave technology behind even for a day. "Mind if I come in?" he asked quietly, his voice lacking the usual bravado. "Of course," I replied, trying not to sound too relieved. Truthfully, my heart ached to see him. Despite the anger and betrayal I still felt, he was my son. Inside, he took in the changes with wide eyes. New walls, new floors, the coziness that was part rustic cabin, part modern efficiency. I offered him a seat by the stove, and he removed his gloves, letting the warmth creep into his fingers. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, staring at the flames. "Ava and well, we really messed up." I set a mug of hot cocoa on the table and tried to keep my composure. I wanted to hold him, reassure him, but a part of me still burned with the memory of that note, those dismissive words. "Tell me why you did it," I said softly. "Why leave me behind?" He sighed, shoulders slumping. "We let our own stresses get in the way. Ava had a major deal she couldn't afford to miss. I was juggling a launch event. He shook his head. "No, that's not an excuse. We stopped seeing you as a person with your own life." Dominic stayed the entire weekend, helping Hank and the crew clear debris from a fallen oak tree out back. He even brought his drone, a sleek gadget that soared above the treetops, capturing footage of the property and the lake. That footage would later become a key part of my plan to make the homestead viable, showcasing the cabin's natural beauty for a community-based website I was thinking of launching. By Sunday evening, the two of us sat in the living room, sifting through the drone's images and discussing potential uses for the land. "You've got enough cleared area to grow vegetables, or maybe some small-scale fruit trees," Dominic mused, scrolling through the aerial shots on his laptop. "I could help you set up an online store if you decide to sell produce or crafts." I felt a glimmer of warmth. This was the same Dominic who, as a teenager, would spend hours designing elaborate science projects on my old desktop computer. I noticed how his tone had changed from dismissive to collaborative. Still, I had to know if this was genuine or driven by guilt. "What about Ava?" I asked carefully. "She's the one who reported me to the county, isn't she?" Dominic's face fell. "She swears she didn't report you. She says she only made a casual inquiry to see if you were violating any laws, and the county took it from there. I don't know the full truth, but she's worried about you, thinks you're making impulsive decisions because of Dad's passing." Impulsive? I let out a bitter laugh. I've done more research in the last few months than I have in my entire life. This isn't impulsive, it's a calculated choice to live on my own terms. He nodded, conceding the point. Look, I'm not taking sides here, but I do think Ava has a hard time letting go of control. It's what makes her good in court. It can also make her blind to how her actions affect the people she loves. Now it's your turn, dear reader. Do you think Ava's actions are coming from genuine worry, or is she just trying to control the situation? Comment 1 for worry, comment 2 for control, or share your own perspective. Let's see where everyone stands. Early February brought biting winds and nights so cold the lake froze over. My new solar panel kept the electric bills low, and the newly installed insulation meant I slept soundly without waking to a chill. Dominic returned to the city, promising to visit again soon. True to his word, he started calling me every other day to talk about everything from job updates to the next steps on my renovations. It was a tentative bridge between us, not quite the warm bond of a mother and son who tell each other everything, but it was progress. Ava, on the other hand, remained distant. She sent me occasional emails reminding me of necessary legal steps to ensure I wouldn't run afoul of the law. The tone was equal parts patronizing and concerned. I ignored her suggestions for a while, focusing on more pressing matters. For example, the main water line needed an urgent replacement, and the boathouse roof leaked whenever the snow started to melt. Hank and I had a running list of repairs, each ranked by urgency. His crew was dependable, though the weather sometimes slowed them down. One weekend, when I was outside stacking freshly cut firewood, Ava called. I could hardly believe my eyes when I saw her name on the screen. "Mom," she said, her voice tight, "we need to talk. Are you free?" I felt an odd mixture of dread and hope. "Yes, Ava, go ahead." "Could we meet somewhere neutral, like the Blue Oak Cafe off the highway? I don't want to barge into your cabin unannounced." Hearing her make that concession, acknowledging my turf, was a small victory. I agreed, and we settled on a date. For days, I felt my heart flutter with anticipation. Would she come armed with legal documents and arguments? Or could we finally have a conversation that began with genuine concern rather than demands? Brief audience check-in. Have you ever had to have a tough conversation at a neutral location? Comment 1 if it was a coffee shop. Comment 2 if it was somewhere else. Wherever it is, it can be nerve-wracking, right? Let's proceed. The Blue Oak Cafe was a cozy, rustic place with cedar walls and a giant stone fireplace that crackled with warmth. I arrived early, choosing a table near the window so I could watch for Ava's car. 10 minutes before our scheduled time, I saw her pull up in her sleek sedan. She stepped out in a tailored coat, her hair swept into a low bun. Gone was the crisp power suit I'd seen at the cabin. She looked subdued. She spotted me immediately and offered a small wave. I waved back, heart pounding. When she entered the cafe, the tension in her posture was palpable. We ordered our drinks, black coffee for her, a latte for me, and settled into our seats, a small table that felt intimate, yet strangely formal. I decided to let her speak first. She folded her manicured hands around the coffee cup and exhaled slowly. "Mom, I know you're upset about what happened at the cabin," she began. "I know I shouldn't have left that note. I was—" Her voice faltered, but she pressed on. "I was overwhelmed, okay? My firm was in the middle of a massive case, and I'd been juggling so much. When you took longer than expected, I just snapped." I studied her face. I could see faint lines of stress around her eyes, ones I hadn't noticed before. A pang of guilt fluttered through me. How long had she been carrying that tension without confiding in me? "You're human," I replied gently. "We all snap sometimes. But it wasn't just the note, Ava. It was everything leading up to it. Years of feeling like I'm only here to serve or to be used when convenient." She swallowed hard. I know, and I'm sorry, but your sudden move to the cabin, on your own, scared me. I thought you might be having a breakdown or something. I almost laughed, but not out of humor, out of disbelief. A breakdown, more like a breakthrough, Ava. She didn't respond immediately, and in the silence that followed, I realized we were at a crossroads. Either she'd accept my new life, or she'd continue to challenge it. We spent over an hour in that cafe, talking in circles and sometimes raising our voices. Ava insisted she was merely concerned for my safety and financial security, particularly after Dad's death, left me with a modest inheritance. She feared I'd lose that money on a half-baked dream. I, on the other hand, reiterated that I had carefully planned my moves and consulted professionals like Hank, people who knew what they were doing. Eventually, our discussion boiled down to a single truth. Ava didn't trust me to handle my own affairs. I couldn't let that go unaddressed. Ava, I said, leaning forward, voice measured, I carried you in my body for 9 months. I changed your diapers, taught you how to tie your shoelaces, put you through college. I may be older, but that doesn't mean I've lost my ability to think or decide what's best for me. Do you understand how insulting it is for you to imply that I'm not competent? Her eyes flickered with emotion, anger, hurt, or maybe guilt. She opened her mouth, closed it, then finally spoke in a much softer tone. Mom, it's not that I think you're incompetent. I just, she fumbled for the right words. I guess I'm projecting my own fears onto you. Dad died so suddenly, and I realized how quickly life can change. I didn't want to lose you too, or see you make a choice you'd regret. It felt like you were running away from us. Running away? I echoed. I was left behind by my own children. If anything, I'm running toward myself, toward a life that lets me be more than just someone's mother or widow. That statement hung between us like a tangible presence. I could see tears pooling in her eyes. She was never one for showing vulnerability, so I knew how much effort it took for her not to blink them away. She nodded, wiped the corner of her eye, and took a shaky sip of coffee. For the first time in months, I saw the little girl inside Ava, the child who'd climb into my lap after a nightmare. I wanted to hug her, but I stayed still, giving her space. Time for a quick question. Have you ever had a conversation with a loved one where you both realized you were each carrying fears? Comment 1 if yes, comment 2 if no, or share your story below. When we parted ways outside the cafe, Ava and I reached an uneasy truce. She agreed to stop any legal or county level interference, as long as I let her review some of my renovation plans for peace of mind. I agreed, with the caveat that this didn't make her my boss or my lawyer. I just wanted her to see for herself that I wasn't jumping in blindly. She nodded, handed me a business card for a local zoning expert she knew, and gave me a brief, tentative hug. It wasn't the warm reconciliation I might have once dreamed about, but it was progress. Back at the cabin, I told Hank about our meeting, and he just grinned. Families, he said, shaking his head. They can drive us crazy, but they can also surprise us. Maybe she'll come around. His optimism was welcome after months of tension. Dominic had already started to come around, calling me daily to talk about the progress here. Now, with Ava's hesitation on the wane, I felt a surprising sense of hope. Sure, they'd hurt me deeply, and I had my guard up, but maybe, just maybe, this new chapter in my life could include them in a healthier way. Spring crept into Pinewood Valley. The lake ice melted, and tiny buds appeared on the few hardy trees I'd planted near the cabin. Hank's crew built raised garden beds, and I found a local greenhouse that specialized in vegetable seedlings suitable for cooler climates. We constructed a small chicken coop in the clearing behind the boathouse, though I still wasn't entirely convinced about raising chickens. Each day brought new challenges: muddy paths, unpredictable weather, supply deliveries that went awry. Yet every challenge felt like a chance to prove, to myself, if no one else, that I was capable. Little did I know the biggest challenge was looming on the horizon. It would come in the form of an official document bearing the seal of a law firm I knew too well. And it would force me to confront a question I had been avoiding for months. Could my children truly accept my new life? Or would they try to wrest it away from me the moment they felt threatened? Late April brought a welcome burst of sunshine that transformed the cabin and surrounding woods into a lush green haven. My raised beds were thriving. Lettuce and spinach sprouted in neat rows, and my herb patch, filled with parsley, thyme, and rosemary, perfumed the air with a delightful sharpness. The boathouse was nearly complete, its roof replaced and its interior gutted and rebuilt to serve as a multi-purpose space where I could store tools, crafts, and maybe even host small workshops. It was during one of these idyllic afternoons that the mail carrier arrived with a certified letter. My heart sank at the sight of the sender's name, Thorne and Blackwell, attorneys at law. I recognized the firm. It was where Ava once interned, and the same place her mentor had established a reputable family law practice. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. Inside was a formal petition for a conservatorship hearing, alleging that I might be mentally unfit to manage my finances and property decisions. Mentally unfit. The phrase made my blood run cold. The letter cited erratic behavior and unconventional financial expenditures as grounds for a judicial review. Attached were examples of my property renovations, references to the farmland expansions, and a note about a potential risk to personal safety. I felt like screaming. I immediately called Dominic. He answered on the third ring, sounding as if he'd just stepped out of a meeting. "Mom, everything okay?" I read him parts of the letter, my voice shaking. There was a long pause. "Mom, I swear to you, this isn't me. I didn't do this. I'd never—" "I know," I said softly. "This has Ava's fingerprints all over it, but why? She promised me she'd back off. She even apologized." Dominic exhaled sharply. "I'll handle this, okay? Let me talk to her. She might be overreacting, or maybe her law firm is acting on her behalf without her direct instructions. Just don't panic, Mom. We'll figure it out." Short reflection prompt. Ever felt like you were ambushed by something you thought you'd resolved? Comment 1 if yes. Comment 2 if no. Let's see if Dominic can help diffuse this situation, or if it's too late. For 3 days, I heard nothing. No calls, no messages, no frantic apologies. I was caught in a web of dread, alternating between anger at Ava and anxiety about the hearing. I checked my email obsessively, half expecting a note from Thorne and Blackwell. Whenever I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, my heart lurched. Would it be a process server, or worse, someone from the county sheriff's office? Hank and his crew noticed my distracted state. "You okay, Ms. Eleanor?" they asked, using the name they all knew me by, my first name. I forced a smile, not wanting to burden them with the messy details of my family drama. Inside, though, I was unraveling. Could Ava really do this? Could she orchestrate a legal move to take control of my life? Dominic finally called late one evening. He sounded exhausted. "Mom, I spoke to Ava, and it's complicated. She says she only advised a partner at the firm that she was worried about you. That partner apparently took it upon themselves to file the conservatorship petition. Ava claims she's trying to withdraw it, but it's out of her hands now because of the firm's procedures." I almost laughed at the irony. The brilliant attorney caught in her own web of legal processes. "So what does that mean for me?" I asked, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the dark window. "It means you might need your own lawyer, unless Ava can fix this quickly. But she's tied up in a big corporate case, and I'm not sure if her priorities are with you or her firm." His voice trembled with frustration. "Mom, if we lose this, they could put all your assets under a conservatorship." You'd lose control of the cabin and the land. You'd be forced to move out if they deem it unsafe. I shut my eyes, waves of disbelief and anger coursing through me. This had gone too far. No, I said, steel creeping into my voice. I won't let that happen. This is my property, my life. If Ava can't undo it, I'll fight it with everything I have. That very night, I pulled out all the paperwork documenting my renovations, my budgets, and my planned expansions. I organized receipts, contractor invoices, and even the emails showing the methodical steps I'd taken to ensure the cabin was up to code. I wanted ironclad evidence that I was of sound mind, that my decisions were based on research, professional advice, and a genuine passion, not impulsive grief. I also called a lawyer recommended by Ingrid from the county clerk's office, a woman named Helena Martinez. She specialized in elder law and had a reputation for championing the rights of older adults who faced undue interference from family members. When I told Helena my story, she seemed both sympathetic and resolute. I've seen cases like this, she said. Most of them don't hold up in court if you can prove competence. But be prepared. Family fights can get messy. Prepared to fight for my autonomy, I breathed a sigh of relief that I wasn't alone. Still, I couldn't shake the heartbreak. It was almost inconceivable that Ava would let things spiral this far. I kept replaying our cafe conversation, searching for any sign that she might have planned this from the start. Had she lied to me? Or was her firm acting without her full knowledge? Either way, it felt like betrayal all over again. In the midst of the legal storm gathering on my horizon, the land itself offered solace. Each morning, I stepped outside, breathed in the fresh air, and listened to the chirping birds. My new chicks, just a handful, pecked eagerly at the feed I scattered for them. The pines stood tall, unwavering witnesses to the drama unfolding in my life. I found surprising comfort in the rhythm of caring for them, of watering seedlings, and of watching new life take root. Engagement moment. If you've ever found peace in nature when personal battles took a toll on you, comment 1 to share that connection. If your solace is found elsewhere, like in art or music, comment 2. These simple acts can ground us in our darkest moments. A week later, Ava unexpectedly drove up to the cabin. I was tending to my garden boxes when I heard an engine, turned, and saw her sedan rolling to a stop beside Hank's battered pickup. She emerged wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, out of character for my polished attorney daughter. Her hair was in a messy bun, and her eyes looked red-rimmed as if she'd been crying or hadn't slept. Without waiting for an invitation, she approached me with hesitant steps. "Mom," she began, voice shaky. "I'm sorry." I pulled off my gardening gloves. "What exactly are you sorry for?" She winced at my directness. "For the conservatorship petition. It was never supposed to be filed. I mentioned to a partner at the firm that I was worried about you, and he took it upon himself to proceed. When I found out, I tried to stop it, but legal processes have a life of their own sometimes. You of all people know that once certain wheels are in motion, it's hard to bring them to a halt." My eyes narrowed. "And you didn't think to warn me immediately?" Ava looked at her feet. "I should have. I was afraid. Ashamed. I knew how this would look." She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "You have to believe me, Mom. I never meant to question your sanity or your right to live here. I was just terrified for you." "Terrified of what?" I asked, my voice rising. "That I might succeed without your permission? That I might be happier than you imagined I could be?" She shook her head vehemently. "That you might be exploited or something goes horribly wrong and I'm hours away, unable to help. Dad's death made me realize how quickly we can lose each other. I couldn't bear the thought of losing you, too." I stared at her, the anger inside me beginning to thaw. I could see genuine fear in her eyes, fear that was misdirected into controlling behavior. It didn't excuse her actions, but it explained them better than any cold legal letter could. Audience participation time. If you've ever had someone's misguided love feel like control, or if you've done that to someone else, comment 1 if you relate. Let's keep going. We sat down on the porch steps, the cool breeze fluttering through the newly blossomed pine branches. Hank and his crew were polite enough to find something else to do on the far side of the property, giving us space. Ava exhaled a shuddering breath. I told the partner who filed that petition to drop it. He said it's too late to fully withdraw. There's a hearing date set, but I can appear in court and testify that there's no merit. For a moment, anger flared again, but I forced myself to stay calm. Fine, I said. We'll go to that hearing, and I'll bring all my documents. Helena Martinez, my lawyer, will be there too. You can explain to the judge how this fiasco started. Ava nodded, chewing her lower lip. Mom, she said at length, I know I can't change what happened, but I want to understand what you're doing here. The renovations, the gardens, the solar panels. Dominic showed me some drone footage. It's impressive. I studied her face, trying to decide how honest to be. Finally, I said, it's more than just a project. It's my second chance to be independent, to do something that feels meaningful. I spent decades pouring my energy into you, Dominic, and your father's dreams. This cabin was originally his idea, but now I see it can also be mine, in my own way. I have no intention of giving it up. She closed her eyes, tears brimming again. I'm sorry I didn't see that. I was so wrapped up in my own life, I forgot you had your own dreams. I thought once Dad died, your life just, I don't know, belonged to us. That sounds horrible, I know. I swallowed. The admission stung, but it was also a relief to hear her say it out loud. My life didn't end with your father's. I loved him, and losing him was devastating. But I'm still here, and I still have value. I'm not too old or too weak to start over. Take a moment to reflect. Is there someone you've overlooked in your life, dismissing their potential because of age or circumstance? Comment 1 if yes. Comment 2 if no. Let's continue. The court hearing was set for late May in the county courthouse, a modest brick building at the heart of Pinewood Valley's small downtown. On the drive there, I felt like my heart was in my throat. Helena Martinez had prepped me thoroughly. Stay calm, answer truthfully, show your documentation, and let Ava testify on your behalf. If she's sincere, this will be cleared up. When I entered the courtroom, Ava was already seated at the front, fidgeting with a pen. Dominic stood behind her, looking equally tense. As soon as Ava spotted me, she offered a small, nervous smile. I wondered if she could see my hands trembling as I placed my folder of documents on the table. The judge, a gray-haired woman with a kind but firm demeanor, opened the proceedings with a recap of the petition. She then invited Ava to speak. My daughter rose, cleared her throat, and began. Your Honor, I need to clarify something. This petition was filed by my firm without my full approval. It was based on concerns I'd voiced, but they were misunderstood. I do not believe my mother is incompetent. In fact, I've seen firsthand the methodical steps she's taken to renovate her property. I withdraw any personal support for this petition and ask that the court dismiss it. The judge gave a measured nod, then turned to me. Ms. Eleanor Lakewood, do you have anything to present in your defense? Helena guided me through the process. I showed the judge invoices for the renovation, photos of the improvements, letters from professionals like Hank, and statements from the county clerk's office indicating that I'd followed regulations. I even had a letter from Dominic explaining my plans for an online shop featuring produce and homemade crafts, evidence of how thoroughly I'd considered this life transition. The judge studied the documents carefully, then looked at Ava. Ms. Lakewood, do you have any objections to your mother's evidence? Ava shook her head, tears in her eyes. No, Your Honor. What came next was a brief deliberation. So brief, in fact, it barely lasted 5 minutes. When the judge returned, she declared, "The court finds no reason to doubt Ms. Eleanor Lakewood's competency. The petition is dismissed. Case closed. Mini celebration time." If you've ever faced a daunting legal hurdle and come out victorious, comment 1 if you know that relief. Comment 2 if you're hoping to get there soon. Onward we go. Walking out of the courthouse felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from the lawn nearby. Dominic came up to me and gave me a tight hug. "Congrats, Mom," he said. "I'm so sorry it even came to this." I patted his shoulder. "I appreciate that. Thank you for being on my side." Ava hung back, her arms folded, her face a mixture of relief and shame. She looked on the verge of tears again, but I wasn't interested in a public meltdown. Instead, I walked over, pulled her into a hug. At first, she stiffened, then she melted into the embrace. "Thank you for telling the judge the truth," I whispered, feeling her shaky breath against my shoulder. She nodded. "I meant it, Mom. I really am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you like this." There wasn't much more to say in that moment. We lingered for a few minutes on the courthouse steps, an unspoken understanding passing among the three of us. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Ava offered to drive out to the cabin the following weekend to help me with some yard work. I accepted. Dominic said he'd bring a small drone filming setup so we could create promotional videos for the produce I planned to sell. Somehow, this felt like a fragile, budding attempt at reconnection. By the time I got back to the cabin, it was late afternoon. I felt lighter, unburdened from the weight of that legal threat. The chickens clucked at me in greeting, their coop a noisy welcome. I checked on the gardens, which were beginning to sprout with new life, vibrant green leaves under the gentle May sun. Maybe, just maybe, I thought, my family could sprout something new as well. A deeper appreciation for each other, a renewed respect for who I am now. True to her word, Ava showed up the next Saturday morning in a pair of worn jeans and old sneakers, so different from the high heels she wore when she first arrived months ago. She brought along a trunk full of gardening supplies, trowels, gloves, potting soil, and a bundle of seeds she'd picked up at a local nursery. Dominic joined us in the afternoon, sporting a backpack filled with camera gear and an even more sophisticated drone. We spent the day clearing brush around the property, raking leaves, and planting flowers near the front porch. Ava proved surprisingly knowledgeable about horticulture. Apparently, one of her clients specialized in environmental law, and she'd picked up random tips during her research. The tension between us had loosened. We found moments of genuine laughter, like when Ava nearly shrieked upon finding a garden snake wriggling beneath the leaves. Dominic teased her mercilessly, reminding her of childhood camping trips where she'd insisted on wearing bug spray that smelled like watermelon candy. By early evening, with the last rays of sun slanting through the pines, we settled onto the porch steps, cold sodas in hand. "I have to admit," Ava said, catching her breath, "I see the appeal. It's peaceful here." She smiled at me, a real smile, not the stiff, lawyerly one I'd grown accustomed to. "I'm glad you're doing this, Mom. And I'm glad you're letting us be part of it." A wave of emotion washed over me, gratitude, relief, and a gentle hopefulness. I raised my soda can. "To fresh starts," I said. We clinked our cans in a makeshift toast, and for a moment, it felt like old times, before careers and big city ambitions drove us apart, before Tristan's passing left us all on different orbits. Quick feedback moment. Do you like seeing the family bond begin to mend, or do you suspect there's still trouble on the horizon? Comment 1 if you think it'll be smooth sailing. Comment 2 if you foresee more obstacles. Let's see who's right as the story continues. Summer arrived in a riot of color. The vegetables in my raised beds exploded in growth. offering fresh lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers. The chicken coop thrived, and I began collecting more eggs than I knew what to do with. Dominic's drone footage helped me set up a small website showcasing the cabin turned homestead. I named it Lakewood Haven, a nod to my late husband's dream and the new life I was carving out. Orders trickled in, locals curious to try my produce, city dwellers wanting a weekend retreat tour. On weekends, Ava often visited with a trunk full of groceries and a willingness to help. Dominic sometimes brought along his new girlfriend, Lydia, who was fascinated by the idea of raising chickens and living off the land. Together, we found a rhythm. We'd work in the mornings, pulling weeds, watering, repairing fences, and then relax in the afternoons with a barbecue or a swim in the lake. If someone had told me 6 months ago that this would be my life, I'd have scoffed. Now it felt natural and right. Of course, there were still flare-ups. One hot afternoon, Ava picked a fight about the color I'd chosen to paint the renovated boathouse. Mom, that bright blue looks like it belongs in a beach resort, not a cabin in the woods, she complained. I laughed, telling her I liked how cheerful it looked, and that I was done seeking permission for my choices. She huffed, but eventually laughed too. We were learning to bend instead of break. And so, with each small victory, I felt the friction in our family ease a bit more. Still, I kept that old note, "You slow us down," folded in a box in my bedroom drawer. Not out of spite, but as a reminder of how far we'd come and how easily things could deteriorate if we stopped caring about each other's feelings. Final audience prompt before we wrap up. If you've been reading this long, comment where you're watching from or comment, "I'm still here." Your engagement helps me see we're in this together. By late August, Lakewood Haven had become more than just a personal passion project. It was a modestly successful small business. People came from nearby towns to buy fresh produce, to attend weekend workshops on canning or bread making, and to soak in the serene atmosphere that had once been just a family cabin. Ava joked that I was turning into a rural influencer, and Dominic teased me for having a more active local following than he did on social media. The day I decided to host an end-of-summer harvest party felt like a milestone. I invited not just family, but neighbors, Hank's crew, and a few regular customers. Long tables draped in gingham tablecloths filled the yard, laden with grilled vegetables, freshly baked bread, homemade jam, and a cooler stocked with cold drinks. Dominic set up his camera to live stream parts of it, capturing the laughter, the music, and the crackle of the bonfire as twilight fell. Under the twinkling string lights, Ava and I found ourselves swaying to a slow country tune. She was uncharacteristically relaxed, a glass of lemonade in her hand instead of her usual coffee. "I'm proud of you," she murmured, meeting my gaze. "I know I haven't said it enough." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you too, of everything you've accomplished. And I appreciate that you and Dominic are giving me the space to do this on my own terms." Nearby, Dominic was entertaining a small group with stories about how I used to chase him and Ava around the kitchen with a wooden spoon if they tried to sneak dessert before dinner. It made me laugh, remembering the simpler times. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone by the dying embers of the bonfire. My mind wandered back to that first crushing moment at the cabin when Ava spat those words, "You slow us down." If only she could see how that note had catalyzed my rebirth, fueling my resolve to carve out a new life for myself. As the last ember glowed and turned to ash, I realized something profound. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in heartbreak, forcing us to become who we were always meant to be. And that concludes today's heartwarming tale of resilience, family reconciliation, and the powerful truth that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Eleanor's journey teaches us that sometimes a painful goodbye can lead to an empowering hello to the future we deserve. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to her Fireside Stories to continue enjoying more inspiring tales. Leave a comment sharing how you felt about Eleanor's journey and tell me, what would you have done in her place? And of course, let me know where you're listening from. I love hearing from all corners of our cozy fireside community. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time by the warmth of her Fireside Stories.